All right, who's introing us this week?
I did last one, so what do you want to go?
Your boy's back in town.
There we go.
Welcome back to Slightly Informed. I missed a week, but I'm here again.
All right.
See everyone's lovely faces. Oh, what's today's date? It's Saturday, April 11th.
The 11th. 4/11.
We're 4/11. We're 9 days away from Nick's favorite holiday. Cherish it.
Although my biggest complaint is that this is the only time we have an entire month of this holiday, and we all have to stay in our own houses for it. It's April of 2020.
I love how
and we're
last year
inside.
everyone was talking about we get a whole month of 420, and there hasn't been a single meme about it because there's just bigger things on the plate.
Yeah.
So welcome back to Slightly Informed. I think Nick's going to kick us off with some very important data, and then I think we're talking about progressive politics, what we have to learn going forward, halftime, playing a game, and then we're going to learn just a little bit more about the Rona. Because I think there's a lot of information on it. We're not going to try to stuff you guys too far into that, but we're going to touch on it. Cause
everyone's talking about it. We got to have our 5 cents, but let's start with something else. We've got a little chart here. Now, people generally see, they see one kind of theft when someone talks about theft. I mean, maybe a few minor differences between them, but basically theft, when someone talks about it, you think of one human being on his own going in, or a group of people stealing property and robbing a person, breaking and entering, all this kind of stuff, stealing a car. But the data just does not pan out to say that is the case. Here is our data. So we've got minimum wage violations under wage theft, $23.2 billion per year for the U.S. 23.2 billion, which encompasses things like companies who pay under a minimum wage with the promise of a bonus at the end of the contract. A lot of times people will use the federal minimum wage if they're a small enough business for a couple of their employees, pay them under the table or something like that.
Yeah, but it's paying people under the table too.
All that kind of stuff, absolutely. Because once you're not submitting all that information, what are they going to do? They're not going to find you. So they'll pay federal minimum wage to someone in a state or a county where it's $12 or $15. They've calculated this to be $23.2 billion stolen directly out of the hands of minimum wage workers. And then we got overtime violations. That's pretty basic. It's something where they shave your overtime hours, or I think Daniel said he had
on next week's time.
McDonald's would round his hours over 40 onto his next week's schedule, and then just keep doing that. I think
Walmart got sued for just if you worked 40.45 hours, they would just put you at 40.
Yeah.
They didn't want to pay the overtime.
Yeah, plenty of companies doing that as well. Rest break violations. Now, in our state, we're probably not contributing as much to this because we have no rules on rest breaks. But a lot of times people will not take a lunch in a state where it's illegal to not take a lunch, and then that employer will then clock you out for that lunch that you didn't take. So 30 minutes of free work a day, 5 days a week for an entire year. And times that by however many people are doing it, 4 billion per year. And then 3.2 for off the clock violations. And then just the little sliver on the right-hand side here, we've got larceny, burglary, auto theft, and robbery. All of them are significantly lower than the total of all theft, but
they add up to less than just minimum wage violations.
On its own. Exactly.
Let alone all the other types of abuses people face.
Well, because think about auto theft. The fact that that's only 3.8 billion is absolutely insane. I would think that sounds about right if it was only times where one person stole one car from breaking into the car, hot wiring it, and driving.
Fast and the Furious kind of heists.
Exactly. I mean, I don't think
I would have almost guessed it was smaller, but
no. What I'm saying is that there's a lot of times where stuff goes they'll report, the company will report that as an auto theft if something happens in the shipping process. If something goes from the factory to the U.S.
It fell off the back of the truck.
Something exactly, or fell off or did whatever.
Exactly.
All that kind of theft. that's straight from the source, and I would have thought that would have been higher. Burglary, 4.1. Actually, kind of surprised that there's more value in that than the auto theft.
Yeah.
I just think it's way more common.
Yeah, that's true.
Everyone knows a story of some crackhead breaking into his aunt's house to steal a DVD player.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
And how many people know people who've gotten their car stolen?
True.
Yeah.
Not as many. But yeah, like this is what's happening. Everyone thinks that it's the poor stealing from the poor, stealing from the middle class, and stealing from the rich.
Yeah, but really it's Walmart.
Walmart is the crackhead stealing your aunt's DVD player.
Exactly, of society.
So yeah,
okay.
No, that's what we've got for our little
quick little hit.
Just to get that out there.
Get your blood flowing.
Back to this, we've got I mean, we talked about it in the last two things, but it's official now. Bernie Sanders has suspended his campaign, leaving a clear path for Joseph Biden to walk his way into the nomination. I would say not into the presidency, but into the nomination. Now, we're
clear on that one.
Yeah. Now, we saw, and we've talked about this on our show a lot, so if you've already heard our back catalog, this isn't your first episode, it's not going to be surprising to hear that. We have a few candidates that we see as proposing a theory of change to society in some way or another, different variables, all that kind of stuff. And each of them gave their own chance. We're going to leave out Gabbard here because that's kind of it's almost like a troll of a campaign.
It's like an onion.
I love Gabbard because she's not afraid to say anything, but she'll never be president in our entire lifetime.
There's no cogent ideology too. I respect what she says, but it's not like you can't get back to a like, oh, this is where the worldview comes together. You know?
Yeah.
Like, end foreign endless wars, but also keep wars on the table because some of them are pretty tight.
It's like I like those anti-terrorism wars, but as long as we're not overthrowing a despot, we're fine.
UBI is kind of cool, but healthcare is not. So
yeah. She's got some. She also has some cringe yikes takes on Islam as well when you talk to her. But we're gonna leave her out of this discussion for now.
Cool.
She was better than, honestly, a lot of other candidates, even though she didn't.
I would have taken her over Biden.
Exactly.
Anything way more fun.
With all of the critiques we just said, remember that we still would pick her over most of the field. But we're going to leave her out of this. So the first one I'm gonna talk about is all of our third pick, and she made a lot of mistakes. Liz Warren. Now, Liz Warren. Of course, was seen at the very beginning as like, why are both her and Bernie running? Like, why? Like, I don't get it. Like, they both are doing the Medicare for All thing. They're doing all this stuff. Like, people didn't get it at first. And then people were wondering, why is Bernie running if Liz is running? And that became more clear as time went on. And I mean, the reason that they both ran is because, like I said at the beginning, they have two different theories of change. Like, Warren's idea was, let's get inside the system the way that Obama did. But let's not sell out. Let's not dismantle everything after
that's
we're
like what
inside.
every sellout says before they sell out.
Exactly.
That's what Obama said too.
No, like, that's the same thing.
We can cooperate and we'll change it from within. It's
exactly.
Like, has that once happened? I can't think of an example.
No, it tends to not pan out because once you're in those circles, unless you surround yourself with people who are directly opposed to that system, you're just not really going to get yourself outside of that viewpoint. Everyone's going to be telling you the same thing. And that's what happened to Obama. He had an idea of a theory of change that he thought would work. And he thought he could manipulate these financial, behemoths that he was saying he was going to go up against for the people. And they ended up manipulating him. They always end up taking the leash back. But if people still think that the other two candidates that we'll mention after this are not their type and they want the Warren style moving forward theory of change, this is kind of the thoughts. Never, ever, and I cannot stress this enough, ever again should any Clinton surrogate ever be hired for a political campaign.
No.
Ever. This shouldn't happen. She failed for a reason. This was not the same thing as like Gore losing on a technicality in Florida because, Jeb Bush, push through some whatever. Like there was not. She lost. She lost a significant amount of the country, a significant enough to paint a very big red patch in that map that usually stays blue. The Rust Belt, everything there, she lost it all. And Warren fell into every single pitfall that Hillary did. The only thing she had better going for her was plans. She had plans.
But even then, like what plans?
They all got watered down.
Candidate before she had plan. Like I never saw her as the plans candidate.
Yeah, she got watered. I mean, because she was the first one out of the gates to say like a specific thing outside of Medicare, I guess, in this election cycle at least. Bernie and Yang came immediately after and like passed her by a mile. Yeah. She's. I mean, that's really what she is. She's a play within the rules, anti-corruption, all that kind of stuff. But here's my advice to if Warren or anyone who wants to take this exact playbook again to recognize where you went wrong. Now, know when you're being manipulated by both political allies, opponents, and staffers, because clearly there was a total change in the way that she was operating her campaign about halfway through. There was none of this before. She was not scrapping with Bernie. She was not talking down to candidates that were, lower in the race or less experienced. And she wasn't doing all this identity woman stuff. Like, basically, every time that someone said she had a win in a debate, that wasn't her directly like calling out Joe Biden, which thank you for that one thing, Liz. But anything besides that, it was pretty much every time just her saying like, the next president should take her, ideas to the next level or something like that. And, if you keep, saying that over and over again.
Or like that other debate where the guy was like, Elizabeth, you would be the oldest president ever inaugurated. And she was like,
I would also be the youngest woman.
And I was like, all right, well,
but yeah, no, like
fire take, I guess.
She played the identity card in the way that Hillary did, and it lost in the same manner. And even though she had a more progressive agenda than Clinton, it didn't pan out, and every step of the way it got watered down by people telling her that these things were untenable, these positions are untenable.
When I think the thing we'll address with her too is, I'm sure when we talk about Bernie next, but the progressive lane was essentially taken, which is why Liz had to switch up a little bit, and so did Buttigieg.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's why they both altered who they were later.
Yeah,
because they realized they couldn't really. I mean, you could probably slice off like tiny chunks of Bernie support, but you weren't going to down Bernie.
No,
so you had to become somewhat more of a centrist.
Mm-hmm.
And for some reason, I think a lot of those boomer politicians too also think that like, oh, if I take centrist policies, but just like attach woke language, like that
I'll
will
get
make
both
me
sides.
liberal. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like, no, I mean,
you're getting the worst of both.
Pretty easy bullshit censor to say like, yeah, that's actually not what we want to see from either party.
Yeah, I mean, the only people that really like center right or right wing like economic policy is people that have been so deep within the Republican Party that they'll never get out, or the wealthy people. Wealthy people.
Yeah.
It's just there's no like, there isn't that middle ground. I mean, there is, but it's literally Liz Warren and her friends. It's literally the New York Times. It's literally Washington Post. It's these people. The problem with elites and trying to take over like just with the votes and the power of the elites is there's not that many of them. There's way more people outside of the system. And if you forget about them, you're not going to do anything. The last two things that I have, at least in my notes for Warren, is do not cut off other progressives at the knee to play for a pole position in the White House. It didn't work last time. It didn't work this time. It's not going to work in the future. If you are going to play yourself to be a more progressive version of something that's already existing,
you also have to have a better play, though. Like I think it could work. I mean, sometimes dirty politics does work, but your whole play can't be like, he said something mean to me in a room where no one else was. If you could pull up a clip of like, here's Bernie saying black people shouldn't vote in the 80s, it would have been like, oh shit, like maybe Bernie is the worst. But if you're like, he said something in a room only to me, and then Bernie's like, no, I didn't. Then, like, how do you expect people to react? Like, people are obviously just going to be like, well, I don't know who to believe, so I'm just going to disregard this whole thing.
Yeah. It's like, I mean, there's an idea that could work, but, like, when you try and do a he said she said too with someone who's the most trusted person in politics, like
as a dumb play.
Yeah, you're not he's not the person to compare your credibility to his.
Breaking up too. McLean, say something.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, we can hear it now. Yeah.
No, I can't hear you. That second thing.
You can't hear me?
No, I can't.
It just keeps cutting out. Yeah, it is weird.
That's weird.
Okay, now you seem a little better.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, see, it cuts out the second either of our mics start talking.
I think we can essentially overpower McLean.
Yeah, so it's like usual.
Oh, great.
Oh man.
All right, back to it.
All right, McLean, raise your hand when you want to talk.
Yeah. I'm also in my Google Doc, so let me know. And then lastly, decide which side you're on and stay in that fucking lane. Are you going to be a centrist? Pick it. Stay in that fucking lane. Are you going to be a progressive? Pick it. Stay in that fucking lane. Like, you cannot, like, flip-flop on this. People are done with that. That used to work for years, where you ran a super progressive primary campaign and then pivot to the most moderate, like, milquetoast thing in the world for the general, because you think
that sucks because people don't trust you at that point.
Yeah, you've lost all your credibility. It's why Pete didn't fucking take off after. It's why we have Biden and not Pete, because people started playing clips of Pete saying the exact opposite of the thing he said 6 months ago.
Yeah.
But the other flip to remember about that too is, like, you have to address how divided the coalitions are going to be, because like the only reason Trump won was because the moderates of the party didn't consolidate.
Yeah,
you still had like Rubio and Ted Cruz and like
Kasich.
Kasich all hanging on till the very end.
Yeah,
and so all Trump had to do was win 33%.
Yeah,
and
he didn't need
the primary.
Yeah, he didn't need 55%.
Like, the moderates of the Democratic Party today, to their credit, maybe learned that lesson and were like, well, shit, either Bernie's going to take it or we consolidate before, like, we get too far into this thing. And that's when they all had their private backroom conversations about what offices they get in the White House. And they all exited the race at the same time.
And a lot of stuff is saying that actually Barack might have been like, there's more confirmation that he's the one who spoke to Bernie before he announced his drop. He spoke to Buttigieg before he announced his drop, and he spoke to Amy before she dropped. So he's been kind of trying not to publicly be involved in this, but wants to still have his hand in everything. Yeah. And
we knew that would happen.
Yeah, I mean, of course it will. Like we said before, he's the God King of the libs. Like he's the eternal Kim Jong-un of WAPO writers, you know. But I'm going to move on past Warren and past the moderates, because we've used more time on her than I wanted to, and we have the two candidates who actually are going to do something in the future, or at least the two wings of the progressive movement.
Two wings,
that are going to be doing something again. No, Bernie's definitely not going again. But as much as I would love to see him just like in like a wheelchair, like what's his face? Oh God!
There was a meme I'll have to send you that was on Reddit, like "Our President" or something yesterday, and it was like Bernie coming back in 2024.
Yeah,
and like a scar down this side of his face, and like
he had like the anarchist flag in the background.
And he had like a full white beard, and
it's like instead we now must abolish the state and private property. But
that would be worth seeing. Everything other than that, now I'm good.
Yeah, so we got the Bernie wing and we got the Yang wing, and they kind of represent. They represent the two particular views we like to take on this podcast, but also I think the most energetic policy direction that we've got is these two wings. And realistically, they're both addressing pretty similar issues. It's just whether or not we sacrifice short-term gains versus long-term gains, all kinds of stuff. My list for Yang, what Yang did wrong.
McLean was talking and he got
go ahead.
You know what? It's fine, Nick.
I can't see you. I'm reading.
I just said there's different views. Like I was agreeing.
And then we just had to bring it back in. All right, we're gonna have to figure this out so it doesn't do that, because somehow it works with me and John. I do not know why it's doing that for you.
I'm hosting it.
No, because last week it did the same thing and I hosted. Yeah. You think the host would be the one cutting everyone else out?
I think I'm just gonna turn my gain all the way up.
Oh God,
as high as possible.
So then when you do like pop in the middle of our sentence, it's like really loud. Yeah. So I'm going to toss this one over to you guys after I give my 4 and see if you guys want to add anything as our.
We're talking Yang.
We're talking
first?
Yang. We're talking the Yang Gang, UBI, tech futurist kind of approach to it. And here's my takes on it, and I think you guys will probably have more than this. But I also think he has less that he did wrong because he was in less of a position to conquer the party. Yeah. Bernie
started at like -5. And
He ran. You've said this before for like a different reason, that he's kind of Bernie of 2016. But I think he just Bernie in 2016 started his campaign too late, and his campaign was an ideas campaign originally.
Yeah,
and then the momentum picked up, and then he was like, "Oh shit, we have to actually do a campaign." Like.
Yeah.
And it was almost a little
there's
late.
A lot of things we could discuss about 2016 too.
But
it's just like you came off 8 years, there wasn't an incumbent president. You essentially had a coronation. So he was just the one guy trying to disrupt the coronation of a person a lot of people deeply hated for many different reasons. So I think Bernie had like essentially easier trip to the top.
At this election,
not anything against him, but with the momentum of 2016 and how who else was there? It was like Lincoln Chafee. Like it was really like Bernie Sanders or Lincoln Chafee to be like the opposition to Hillary. Like, of course, Bernie's going to end at like 40%,
Yeah.
So and he gets that national name recognition to come into 2020.
So that's why I think when I get to the Bernie part, like I have a lot more notes on where the Bernie movement needs to go than the Yang, because Yang, they weren't in the position to have that jump off point. But here's where it is. And the first one is that same one, starting late. He did start a little late. I think, and this is too.
He started incredibly early, but no one paid any attention until he went on Joe Rogan. He started like February of like 2018 or something like that.
The perception is that he started super late, but John's right.
I agree with that. Yeah.
I've been there. I've been paying attention to him since the beginning, but like, I feel like he could have been doing things. Was it February of 18?
I think it was February of 18. Yeah.
Well,
I don't think that's
even our radars for a minute, maybe 6 months before Joe Rogan. And the second Joe Rogan happened, it like was wild.
Well, I think he popped on my radar for Sam Harris, who was like 2 months before Joe Rogan. And then Sam Harris told Joe Rogan to have him on.
Oh, okay. So he founded the campaign itself right then, and then it looks like he got his first press release or his first interview a couple months later that year. So in June.
You really have to remember with
but
Yang,
like that's when Bernie started in 2016.
Crowded Field, though, zero name recognition. Like they literally thought it was like, what's the dude who wears the boot on his head? They thought like random dude who's
Vermin Supreme.
Nowhere. Yeah, exactly. But that's how the media treated him for the longest time. It's like we don't have to actually talk about Andrew Yang because there's 0% chance he makes the debate stage. And then he made the debate stage, and then it's like we don't have to talk about Andrew Yang because there's 0% chance he makes the next one or the one after.
Yeah.
And then he does, and then everyone starts to be like, oh shit, who is this guy? But we don't have to worry because there's no like 0% chance he overtakes
exactly
Kamala Harris or lasts longer than like Beto O'Rourke.
But he did.
And then it's like, oh fuck, he did. And then like they finally started talking about him like a month and a half before he dropped out.
Only about half the time too, because like they would still cut him out of pictures. They would still not include him in the options.
Yeah, Yang media blackout for sure. Yeah.
And also I wanted to add that the starting late is also not a discredit to him. I think it's actually a credit to the idea that his first plan was not run for president. His first plan was lobby. His first plan was to make noise in DC without trying to become a leader of the country, without trying to do that. He wanted to bring it into the public in other ways, and people weren't listening. So I don't think it was his fault. I don't think he like started late necessarily, but I think he definitely had his eyes set on a much more achievable thing,
which might be the same thing I'm thinking.
Well, no, because he came out originally and said, "I'm not fucking crazy."
I don't want to run for president.
Like,
and then it happened where he's like, "This is the only way we take care of shit," So he shifted it and ran for president, but that definitely wasn't his original intention.
No, and that's to his credit, honestly. Like people hear that and relate to that.
Yeah.
Like they don't like the people, they don't like politicians, but they also don't want to be a politician, you know?
Yeah.
No one's like,
exactly.
No one's like, I want to be the president to fix all this shit.
Well, I think that was a more understandable narrative too, coming from the outside, because that like was part of what got me, was like he said like I didn't want to run for president because I'm not a crazy person, and normally I'd be like, okay, yeah, that's exactly what like a politician would say. But then it was like with his actual creative ideas, it was like, oh, I mean, you're right.
This is
like,
something a politician wouldn't do.
Yeah, and like no one was going to bring any of these ideas forward besides you. So like, of course you had to run for president, because like you're not like the guy who's just like, oh, I have everyone else's idea, I just happen to be the governor of Montana. You're like actually coming in with like weird, crazy ideas that might have some effect on the country.
Yep. No, absolutely. And I think the next one is going to kind of play into that first one, at least as far as my things to steer the Yang Gang is needs name recognition, which he got. He needed name recognition earlier than he got, and he did get it, and he established himself, which is, I think, my next one as well. He has to walk this fine tightrope here, which Bernie, I don't think is in. I mean, he's been walking the tightrope, but I think Bernie's needs to pick a side of this tightrope, whereas Yang, I think, needs to walk right on this line where Yang needs to establish himself as a political actor on a national level without becoming an insider. This does not mean becoming a congressman or a senator or a governor or whatever. It doesn't mean any of that, but it does mean making plays in the public eye as a political actor over the next 2 to 4 years.
Or at least maintaining trust, because the thing with Bernie is like, he is a senator, but you can trust he's not like a political insider, because he still has his same ideology he had back then, and he never sacrificed it.
Exactly.
So even if Yang did want to become a senator or a congressperson,
you
just have to like, you just have to maintain the trust that like, oh, because we've had the conversation before that we think a lot of people go in to like make positive change, and then you're surrounded by so many like swamp creatures that like you slowly become corrupted, and there's a very few amount of politicians who don't become corrupted. So you at least have to like maintain that narrative that like I'm still who I am as a human being outside of Washington politics.
Yeah, it's almost amazing to think that like Bernie could have been in the system as long as he was and not like lost ground in or just given ground on his positions just to make political friends and make life more easy.
Well, a lot of people like explain it to themselves as political expediency, but like in the long term, it's usually not. It's just convenience.
It's power too. I mean, it's who you're willing to bow to, you know, like, or bend the knee.
Yeah, bend the knee.
And then lastly, I think Yang needs to find a coalition partner who will not stab him in the back, meaning another actor within the realm of politics, media, something like that, to be his how the squad was for Bernie.
CNN contributor,
a backup. I mean, yeah, and he's doing that. He's doing all of his stuff. But what I think he needs is like I said, like a basis inside the politic of US. You know, I mean, we've got AOC Tlaib is one of the best congresswomen that I've seen in a while. You know, Ilhan Omar has really good takes, but has, you know, maybe working on her media stuff a little bit better over time. I think there needs to be that infrastructure for a futurist kind of UBI future. Like I think that's going to be a roadblock if we don't have a reverberation of his speech, because when Bernie had to be in Washington for the entire investigation and all that stuff for Trump. He had a squad of people. He had Ro Khanna, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Tlaib, Omar.
But see, none of that changed anything.
But
I mean, that's the hard part about when we're talking about like what the progressive movement has to learn is like none of that mattered. Because all that mattered was that like the vice president has higher name ID with uneducated voters.
Yes, there are bigger hurdles.
Like that's what I think.
But
like
I
the
think
bigger
that's
hurdle
something
to me is somehow rationalizing like a social communist future versus like a techno capitalist future, and both realizing like those are better than status quo, and somehow we have to like unite under some umbrella that gets us to a higher percentage than status quo.
Absolutely.
Otherwise you're just going to keep getting beat by the Joe Bidens of the world, and none of us are pro that.
The problem is, and I think the ultimate problem is this, that the moderate wing of both parties have an apparatus with which they can organize, which they can control, and almost have an authoritarian sense of who does what. Because when Pelosi says something, it goes for about 90% of Democrats. When Chuck Schumer says something,
for the Republicans once Trump took over, now it's the party of Trump.
And that's the thing.
I think all you have to
get
do
someone
is get in there.
Well, yeah.
And then you're the head of the party now. You could install whoever the fuck you want. And if the senators don't bow to you, then you just go rally against them for whoever's challenging their incumbency. Boom. That's we have to do what Donald Trump's willing to do to the right, which is say oh, you don't want to blow me in the Washington washrooms.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to endorse your challenger, and we'll see how that turns out, because most people like me and not your bullshit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and people like the liberals, and they agree with your mainstream conservatives on this idea, which is that politics is downstream from culture, that you have to initiate a cultural battle that will then change politics, when realistically there's an interplay between the two, but the more prominent thing is that culture is downstream from politics. When Bernie won the first 3 states, even when they were trying to water it down and say he tied one, lost one, and won one, even though he really won all 3, the momentum changed. MSNBC immediately released a statement after hearing tons of pressure saying, we're going to have to hire some people with this type of viewpoint so that we're not seen as illegitimate and all this kind of stuff. So as soon as you give your movement and your political position an actual place of power, then everything has to fall in line after that. Not to say that we shouldn't be fighting a cultural fight now, but that is the direction that it flows more frequently. Politics to culture. And it's about winning. It's about getting people in there, bodies on the ground.
You got to start from the ground up. But I also think the thing that we have to address as the progressive wing, and I think we can try to address as our podcast, because we have the Yang half and the Bernie half, is just how do we as a movement learn to get along? Because I know all of us listened to Chapo Trap House, and they were not unfriendly to Yang, but thought he was wrong on most of his policy proposals.
They were occasionally uncharitable.
No, and I think that's fine with that. But I think both sides
it's a sign that
either of our guys would be better, and we should unite under some sort of umbrella to oust the establishment.
Absolutely.
I don't think if you asked any of them, would you rather have Andrew Yang or Joe Biden, they would say Joe Biden.
No, of course not. Absolutely not. Yeah. And you ask anyone in the Bernie movement or in the Democratic Socialist general movement, that's going to be their answer, is either Bernie, Warren, or Yang, what we said. Those are the only 3 that are tangibly going to make a difference in the world. But yeah, I think tactical unity, because you don't have to align each other. You don't have to engulf each other. We don't have to have the socialist movement wing come in and explain ourselves, left-splain ourselves to the Yang crowd and try and make them think that we're right. They don't have to think we're right. I don't have to win you guys over on any of my platform ideas that differ from yours for you guys to see the consistency with which a platform could be put forward that endorses both of these ideas, or at least that moves the needle far enough in a direction that hands significant power to both of our positions.
But I think if we're trying to bring up lessons to learn for the future, is chances are realistically Andrew Yang's going to run again in 2024. Chances are Bernie does not run again.
He will not.
But you're going to have someone who takes up that mantle and is trying to be the new Bernie Sanders. Whether that's
I've heard Tlaib tossed around. AOC has of
age.
AOC, she would be of age she would be of age right when I think that year. But I think Tlaib would have been eligible this year. But I've heard that AOC is not interested in it.
But every politician says that.
Says that exactly. Yeah, of course, you have to.
But I think what I'm trying to bring up with that is that you're gonna have these representatives, and neither I doubt any of them is the out front winner of the race. You're gonna have a few moderates who also think they're gonna run.
We're gonna have an uphill battle against Mayor Pete.
Yeah, exactly. Or Andrew Cuomo or some bullshit that's gonna happen in 2024. So, but I just want to bring up the fact that like at some point someone's going to lose, and the progressive wing should make overtures to whoever that loser is to try to bring their people under. Because realistically, it wouldn't have made a big difference this time if, like, say Bernie Sanders adopted UBI, but it would have been nice, you know, to say like, hey, you guys who are now in like an ousted politician, we're going to bring UBI in as opposed to a federal jobs guarantee. Medicare for all is still the priority, but we're bringing in UBI, and we hope you can join us and campaign for us and yada, yada. Or if the flip is true and you have like a really like mess socialist and you have Andrew Yang still running
and just tossing like, his olive branches, being like, here, I'm going to
look, Medicare for all is very important. We're going to bring that one around. And I think UBI is the most important first step, but then we're going to do Medicare for all. And I think you can stack a federal jobs guarantee on top to try to improve infrastructure.
Oh yeah.
Whatever you want to do.
Absolutely.
But I think you need to like toss olive branches, and in a way that Joe Biden is not currently doing, toss better olive branches.
Absolutely.
Joe Biden olive branch to the Bernie movement, a movement he knows he has to get to win. In a way, Bernie didn't have to get Yang because Yang was only like 5%, but the Burners were like 30% of the Democratic primary vote, and Joe Biden's fucking olive branch is like lowering Medicare 5 years
to an age that is still like 1% of Bernie supporters still.
Yeah, and forgiving like some student loan debt in a way that like Bernie and AOC and a lot of that wing think universality is way more important to programs. So I think when our wing runs next time, whoever doesn't get to take the pole position for the progressive wing has to extend olive branches that actually try to pull the other people into the in group.
Absolutely. And this one is one of the things that I wrote under my things for the Bernie campaign here is like tactical unity gets the goods, because there's a huge, people talk about how Trump was a niche movement, and it was, but a niche movement with a lot of niche, like different areas around it, that is strong. You had white nationalists, you had libertarians, you had people who were like absolutely dyed in the wool, like center of the road,
the crowd
moderate,
who thinks like business people is the right people to run the country. Who,
exactly.
Like, a lot of them aren't racist. They just think, oh, magically business people have the powers to like fix things.
Yeah,
and it's like, oh, businesses don't really run like a country, but cool.
Yeah,
but he managed to pull those people in, you know.
Yeah, like people like someone I think talked about like literally a mayor is more prepared to be president than most CEOs. Yeah, because you're making executive
most major
decisions.
CEOs. Because come on,
yeah, for real. Wait, hold up, McLean, go ahead.
No, what do they do? I mean, compared to mayors, they're far less qualified.
Well, because they don't really do like they only make the they make the generalized decisions in the company. They don't make specific decisions, you know.
I also think if I can bring up a lesson for Bernie to win or to like attempt to do, or like the Bernie of next time, because again, I think he's gonna be like what 84, like don't run again.
It's not don't run again. No,
can we?
I love you, Bernie.
I mean, you were my guy. I'm sorry, I fell in love with a different man, but please don't run at 84.
No.
But I think you have to try to, because realistically, probably you wouldn't have gotten like a Mayor Pete or a Beto O'Rourke or an Amy Klobuchar endorsement, but you should like try to get those, because if you can divide the moderate wing, I think that is like, because essentially right now the progressive wing is divided. So what we have to try to do is play like internal politics bullshit and divide the moderate wing and say, hey, you know, Pete, what you need is experience to win next time. And without saying it, because you don't want to like explicitly bribe a campaign to come over, but just be like, you know, we can give you that experience you need in our administration. Like something, because I'm sure that's what Biden did. I'm 100% sure to say like, oh, you could be Secretary of State. Boom. Like I know like Bernie has high moral fiber and probably didn't want to do that and doesn't want to. But I think if the progressive wing
if it means getting someone into the office, do it.
And if they could find a way just to divide them, like just divide and conquer, because chances are we can't overpower like an entrenched Democratic DNC establishment. But if we manage to peel off a few of like the people that they're already like highbrow people in that group, just be like, well, you know, I think this time it is Bernie who's going to win. So I will endorse him.
Biden for sure did that, and there's no way, in my opinion, there's no way Biden wins. But if he did, it would be interesting to know what jobs he promised to, because he
that. I guess we'll never know. But he's gonna get his ass kicked.
There's still a chance. I mean,
no, there is. Yeah,
but there's still a chance. I'm not.
There's a chance, but he made some big mistakes and recently with all the Corona stuff,
which started out looking bad for Trump. Now it doesn't.
It's doing this. I swear to God, it's so crazy watching like the evolution of things during this whole coronavirus thing, because he'll do one thing and everyone's like, good plan. Yes, you should definitely fund the stimulus package. Great plan. And then he comes out and says one thing and you're just like, what are you doing? And then he talks about I forget the name of the drug, but does this and
hydroxychloroquine.
Yeah.
Hydroxychloroquine. How he's like, oh, it's great, nothing can happen. And then I think I talked about this last podcast, how like the president of the AMA or whoever goes, yeah, it could kill you. And
yeah.
It's not how drugs work, buddy.
And it's crazy to see how so many people just ignore the stupid shit he says. Yeah. And when he does one good thing, they're like, oh, we're gonna ride on that for like a year. This is gonna be
No, I completely agree with the roller coaster, because it was like $1,200 stimulus, like twice UBI, like once a month, and I was like, he just won this shit.
Yep.
And then it was like, it'll take 8 weeks to get to you, and I was like, oh. And then it was like 600 extra on unemployment. And I was like, interesting. And it was like also 6 to 8 weeks to get to you, and we're like dipping down the 2-time payment to 1-time payment, and it's just every time he does something good, I'm just like, oh shit, this shit's sealed. Mm-hmm. And then he comes out and does something incredibly dumb, which is to be expected. And you're like, can we not?
Thing that you said earlier that you didn't think it would make that big of a deal if Bernie got all behind UBI, right? I think it would have, he couldn't foresee it, but it would have made quite the impact.
It would have been a convincing argument to make, to be like, oh, you guys, the government currently wants to give you guys checks. If only someone had thought of that 6 to 8 weeks ago.
And oh my God, can you imagine if Yang was still in the campaign right now?
Oh yeah. I think if he had a bigger name recognition, he could have even just came back and been like,
if you want.
Yeah. Right. Who told you this was a good idea? It's like a quarter ago.
Yep.
This guy.
It just blows my mind that I've read so many different things, and just scrolling through Twitter can be a crazy roller coaster. But some people are like, it's so great that Trump's doing this. That's such a great idea. And it's like, do you really think that this was him? Like, no, like this has been talked about for months and months and months. And it
also, in fairness, it wasn't Yang's idea. UBI, he's never taken credit for.
Credited UBI to Yang.
Raised it to a national stage, though, in a way that I think if he didn't, it wouldn't have been talked about from Trump or all these other countries around the globe.
Absolutely.
The check I'm going to get in the mail in 4 weeks to Yang. Really, I don't think, maybe it would have happened, especially because, up there, Canada's throwing out $2,000 a month for 4 months, which is crazy. That'd be real nice. But I don't know if it would have happened, but I think the likelihood of it happening would have been way less if Yang hadn't run.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's a chance, but I agree with you. I think there's a much lower likelihood that it would happen. Mm-hmm. Now, we have burned more time on this than I thought, so I'm going to burn really quickly through this. We'll probably cut out some of this in the audio version, but I'm going to upload the full uncut.
Ooh, uncut YouTube.
Director's cut version on YouTube. So get that premium content. So I'll burn through this here, but these are just kind of specifically more for the Bernie wing, but some of these overlap for the overall progressive. And I think that, of course, we'll have to unify in some way. So this, of course, will overlap as well. But here's my takeaways. Now, one, the media will never be on our side. Channel it like Trump did. Trump did amazing with that. Trump played the media like a fiddle. He made them his bitch. It was great. And I think that there's a way that you can do that without being racist, sexist, xenophobic, or whatever. You can still make it so that they have to cover you. Because there wasn't positive coverage of Trump at all. But there was coverage. There was $3 billion worth of free coverage in 2016 for Trump.
No such thing as bad publicity.
Exactly. Get your name in the headlines. And I heard someone who I highly respect say that the Bernie blackout might help us this time, and I think he had some good points in it, but I disagree. And that was Ryan Grimm over at The Intercept. He said that we've seen a lot of candidates like Buttigieg and Beto and Kamala and all these people. They have this like curve, and they come up, and then they become the new hot thing, and then the media realize, oh, we gotta talk about this person, and then they dig up their past, and then they go back down and they die. And he's like, that hasn't happened to Bernie because they've been pretending he doesn't exist this whole time while he's been steadily growing. So if you don't need the media to grow and they can't like kneecap you by doing that, then whatever. And I think that's a good point. But I think that you need to put your face in front of the people for as long as you can. People need to know what you're pushing.
That, and even if they did dig up his past, it would only help him.
Exactly. You can't make him like they've tried to make him look bad. Remember the
own it.
Remember the time that they made him look bad? They tried to make him look bad by saying he took a honeymoon vacation to the Soviet Union, and it was like, that tourism was allowed. That happened all the time.
It wasn't even that with Bernie though. Like they had like what's it called where you like trade people across two cities so your cultures can interact. They had that going on. So like he went over there to interact with, and it wasn't even like he didn't go to like Moscow. He went to like the little town that they were trading people with for like cultural like exchange.
He went to a tiny underground pub at a tiny town in the middle of
I heard that for sure makes him a communist.
Yes, that's absolutely yes.
He went to the USSR. He is a communist.
He is proposing Mao's cultural revolution.
It's pretty bad. It's pretty bad.
Kill all landlords. Let's go.
I won't shout out this person, but I think both of you know who I'm talking about when I say this. I talk to this person every day. And he told me that thing. He's like, you know, blah 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 blah. Bernie went to Russia for his It's like, oh God, that doesn't. Whatever. I can't.
But I was thinking on the topic of media, like in media manipulation, it reminds me of like this Tyrion Lannister quote where he says like, "Never forget what you are. The rest of the world will not. Wear it like armor, and it can never be used to hurt you." Trump did that like to the T. It was like,
perfect.
"Oh, you called Rosie O'Donnell like a fat bitch, or you called women like fat bitches," and he was like, "No, I didn't. I called Rosie O'Donnell a fat bitch."
And everyone loved it because that's how they talk.
Yeah.
They don't care.
Well, or even outside of how they talk, like you don't need to apologize for everything you say because over the course of a human lifetime, everyone has said some very dumb things. Mm-hmm. I guarantee things we say on this podcast will be used against us in the future. I will bet money on it. Mm-hmm. And I think the only way to go about something like that, if you want to be at all involved in the media, is to say like, I might have said that. What's the context? Like, was it a joke? Like, was it about one person specifically? Or did I say that? Like, you know, like I might have said that. I might change now. Who cares? I don't know. Yeah. That's not exactly what I'm saying right now.
Yeah, you can even say like, I don't know what context I said that in at the time, but my current position is this.
Yeah, exactly.
It's perfect.
But you don't need to go apologizing for everything left and right or trying to be like the perfect candidate. No, people understand that they're not perfect. And that was something most people said about Trump. They were like, you take him literally and we take him seriously.
Yeah.
It's like, because they understand they've probably said some dumb racist shit too. And they feel like that's not the judge of their complete character.
I think the only thing he really did apologize for was the grab her by the pussy comment.
Mm-hmm.
He
I don't even think he really apologized. He was just like, yeah, it's locker room talk.
That is true. That is kind
of like that's not true either, because that's not how guys have ever talked in any locker room I've been in.
Oh no,
but he didn't even like apologize for it. He was just like, you know, that's locker room talk.
Yeah.
So like,
I'm just being real.
But if someone doesn't feel bad about something, it's hard to use it against them. You know, like I think the left has to understand that. Like, we're not going to
have some grit.
Perfect, like intersectional elite candidate. Like, you have to understand. Like, look at their policy. Look if you trust them as a human being, and see if like you think they would do a good job representing you, and then accept their flaws. Because if we make this like a purity test every single time, I mean, not to go all like middle of the road, like no purity test, lion caves.
Yeah.
But like, if we do try to purity test about every little issue, like we're never going to get anyone good in there. We're just going to turn to whoever's like, oh, he has the most experience. I guess that's who we should go with. You know?
Yeah.
Like, understand what your core beliefs are and who's going to represent them best.
And the battle will never be downhill. We will always be pushing a boulder up a hill trying to win a battle with the media. So take what you can get. take what wins you can get and then use that against them. Know what moves they're going to make. We have 2 full campaign cycles to see what playbook they're going to use. Guess what they're going to do in 2024? The same playbook. It doesn't matter who we put there. That's the playbook. Ignore them until they're big enough, and then attack them.
If these are lessons for the future, old people die a lot. Yeah. So like look for forms of new media. Because I know Bernie went on Joe Rogan, but like go on everyone's podcast who has more than like 100,000 listeners.
We need a Liz Smith for the left.
Yeah, or go on fucking the radio. Like old people listen to the radio. Like it doesn't always have to be the MSNBCs and the CNNs of the world. You could even try to float Trump's like stuck in the cock of this OAN bullshit. That's not even a real network. They're just networked to like prop up Donald Trump. Like find like any like TV media or like journalist specifically who's going to be positive towards you and go on their show specifically. Like you have to take whatever comes up and understand like new media will eventually take over old media.
And
if it wasn't this cycle, it will be next cycle or the cycle after that.
Yeah, and here's the thing with the media and stuff. Like I said, Liz Smith is the one who put Pete Buttigieg in front of everyone's face and made him a thing out of nowhere. Like, smart. And she's done it before. Smart, She's done it with campaigns a lot actually, and she's really, really, really good at it. Like I hate her. She's a centrist, like shill, middle of the road corporate cuck, but she is can
run a good campaign.
Very good at that. And like here, I had someone who she's got Bernie 2016 stickers and we need Medicare for all stickers on her laptop. But like, you know, she hadn't paid attention right up until this cycle started. One of her favorite shows had Pete Buttigieg on. They didn't have Bernie on until 4.5 months later. And they just they didn't even interview Bernie. They just did like a funny thing where they're like, hey, he's kind of a socialist. Let's show him some expensive sneakers and watch him react. And it was funny. It was entertaining. But like that was months later. Pete Buttigieg was there. And I had to explain to her why Pete Buttigieg is not a progressive and a good guy. Like why he's not like Bernie, who she supported and voted for and was very strongly involved with in 2016. She didn't know because she had only seen him and he was, you know, charming and funny and, you know, whatever. Like he's somewhat charismatic sometimes. Like you get people out there in front of their faces, then you really like, I had to deconstruct it with her, and that takes time.
If you already like the person.
Exactly. If it takes time for them to dismantle your person, you're winning. That's what you're doing. So the left needs that as well. And then don't feign friendliness with the people who would gladly lose to Trump and the GOP if it means that Bernie, Yang, or Warren lost. Like you don't have to start every sentence with my good friend Joe Biden, and he is a good friend, and I trust him a lot. But here's where I disagree. Like that's great. It sounds you're really taking the high road. It sounds professional. It sounds political, like a political statement. But just you gotta just be able to say like, I'm a colleague of Joe's. I've worked with him for a long time. I'm very familiar with him. This is where this is why he's wrong. And I've disagreed with Joe for decades on this topic. And like, I never heard him say that. Like, that's something that's very easy to say. I have disagreed with Joe Biden on these issues for 30 years. Like, here's where my position is. Like, he occasionally does that. He pivots to his position, which is good. Always be the positive position, like promoting. Always has to be somewhere in there because you can't just constantly be taking everything else down.
Yeah. I also think just as like a point of hope too, like I think it's a lot harder for like a progressive outsider to win against like a scary incumbent.
Oh yeah.
The same way like no one unique got in there in 2004. We had like bullshit John Kerry. It was like,
and they rushed the guy. They wanted him to be like, hey, we got to find a guy so we can hurry up and get on the campaign trail.
Exactly. And there was like, it didn't work. But in 2008, when you didn't have George W. Bush to worry about, you got Barack Obama, who like whether or not you like how he turned out, he ran a
populist campaign,
change candidate. And he overpowered Hillary Clinton, who was already like the deer of the establishment. So I think like realistically, either of our movements has a much better chance of succeeding when we don't have to worry about Donald Trump.
Oh, absolutely.
Whether that's after one term of Joe Biden or whether that's the second and final term of Donald Trump. Like once we're done with whatever's happening right now, I think you have a much better chance taking a risk. People don't like to take risks. And I think especially uninformed voters don't like to take risks, which is why it was hard to get Bernie Sanders, even though he won the first 3 contexts.
Yeah.
Because voters are scared because media scares them.
It's
Because
like
they've been telling you for three years that Trump's the ultimate boogeyman, and all that matters is getting him out. Doesn't matter how we get him out. All that matters is we get him out. We got vote blue no matter who, like all that bullshit. Like, so it was hard for moderate voters and voters who didn't know as much to come in and say like, hey, I'm taking a risk on this like random Asian dude no one knew 6 months ago, or even take a risk and say like, hey, I'm going to vote for this socialist, even though socialism was a dirty word in America for everyone who's over like 50. Like, it's hard to take risks when you've been told like, oh shit, we might not have an election in 2024 if we lose this one.
Yeah.
You know, like it's hard to take risks. And I understand that.
Yeah.
I mean, I still think risks would have been
a better option.
Yeah, I mean, I think so, but I understand why if you didn't follow politics in a way we do, even in a slight way, why you would think like, oh, Joe Biden, I know who that is, and I know he has a good chance.
Yeah, and this leads into one of my more kind of easier ones here for both of us to do, is that both sides of this movement need to be making the case for electability much, 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 much earlier. That should be your first thing that you talk about, is the electability of progressive economic policies. Now, you can say what you will about any of the cultural policies or anything to give up, but if you leave all that aside and just like handed people saying, hey, do you want a society owned, run, controlled, and basically making any sacrifice for the welfare and benefit of the people who are billionaires, or should you do the opposite of that and make those people the losers in the economy, at least on a slight level, in order for the vast majority of people in the world or in the country to have a better life? Of course, that's going to resonate more with people than saying billionaires should keep all their money.
It's going to resonate more next time too, though, because we're going to be coming, whether it's a Democrat, or whether it's Biden or Trump who wins this time, or we get some wild card, your chances are we're coming off of at least a recession.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be an easy time for either of our wings to step in and be like, oh, is it tight that billionaires increased their net worth over the last 4 years by like an extra like 100%? Or do we want to kneecap them and take $1,000 a month for ourselves? But that's a very easy argument to make. I think it's also an easy argument to make like, oh, shit, you've been unemployed since 2020. How would you like it if like the federal government stepped in and said, hey, here's a $15 or $20 an hour minimum wage job, and you always have that. You don't have to worry about it.
Pension.
I mean, even if it was like
covered.
They did that after the Great Depression. They were like, you're going to go build fences in the national parks.
Yeah.
It's like, cool, because I don't have any other job. Like I'll fucking take that and I'll vote for you for 3 terms. And because of that, they'll have to institute term limits. You know,
and infrastructure, highway building. They built this country off of the back of that, after the back of the New Deal.
The interstate.
So I think, the interstate system. Yeah, I mean, you're right, Maklain.
And my last one on the electability and on this time, and it ties in with what we were just talking about as well. Harvey K talks a lot about it in his book. I thought I had it out here, but I don't. Take hold of our future. That's what it is. And basically what he says is that like you need to we need to provide a historical context. Like the only time, the reason we have presidential term limits is because New Deal policies were so popular that someone won 4 elections in a wheelchair, won 4 elections. And who else would have won 4 elections after that?
Yeah.
Reagan, maybe? No, he died.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
There's no one else. No one else. Like they didn't. You would have to have such an insane level of charisma to make up for not taking care of human beings and win that many times. Like,
I agree. Use
that historical context to say, when you give people things, when you give them like tangible things that they can like look and be like, wow, you mean I'm gonna have $1,000 more to spend on my expenses each month, and that's not going to eat into my taxes at the end of the year? Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I think you also have to like be able to call like media's bullshit.
Yes.
Because a lot of the media this cycle was like the economy's doing great. How are you going to argue that? You just got to be able to say it's not doing great. Most people can't afford an unexpected bill. Would you argue that the economy's doing great if most people can't afford an unexpected bill? Is that really what you're telling me? And then you can throw it back at them. Like, be a little combative. Like everyone's trying to focus on being nice. Like, let's not like there is a reason
have
to be
some
angry.
grit.
You don't have to be angry all the time. You could laugh and joke around,
Mm-hmm.
but there are things that should upset you about our current society. And if you put that forth, sometimes I don't need someone who's a dick 24% of the time, or like 100% of the time. But if you want to be a dick like a few percent of the time to people who ask you really dumb questions like that, feel free. They're not going to lose my vote.
Absolutely.
I mean, if people are asking you really dumb questions, I feel free to be like, yeah, I don't think the economy's doing good.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. Like, I mean
right that's simple. You don't have to like elaborate on it.
The biggest
hey Nick, how's the economy? How are you going to argue against Donald Trump when the economy is doing better than it's ever done before?
Well, even though the economy was good, no. You don't do that. You just say no. You just say fucking no.
Boom. Flatten it.
Like, look, right now is a perfect time. 16.6 million jobless Americans that had jobs weeks ago. Best week in Dow Jones history this week so far. Yeah,
it's wild.
Ever. Best stock market rally ever, and no one has been guaranteed any kind of for sure stimulus. There's no guarantee. Like the economy is not run to have the stocks actually do it and make that case anytime someone brings it up. I think the last thing I need to say is this one's more for Bernie supporters than for any of the politicians, but I think the staffers should also be finding ways to do this and to maybe disseminate this among the ranks of whoever takes up the mantle next time. But the supporters need to do a better job of pointing out the flaws of candidates without making their supporters feel personally responsible for the flaws of their candidates or feel stupid for following them. Like we say, I feel like we get lost in the weeds because we end up responding to people above our power level. We end up like people like us, people who are even Chapo and stuff like that. They're responding to people in New York Times. They're responding to people in Congress, in Senate, in stuff like that, who can pretend that you don't exist. They can all pretend you don't exist and they don't have to engage with you. And then it's just you screaming to the wind and only your fans are hearing it. And then when someone sees you saying that Pete Buttigieg is a rat-faced fuck, I just invested.
It's more for entertainment value than
exactly.
People come to your side. Like, let's be honest with ourselves about that.
It is.
No one who's a Pete supporter is going to hear that and be like, "That was a very cogent argument."
Exactly.
Go support Bernie. So, that is way more about entertainment than it is ever about pulling people to your side.
Absolutely, and the dunking I think works for a lot of things. It actually has helped in a lot of ways, but I think they just need to be careful about
the dunking is so much more for entertainment value though. Like I think while you're actually running, you should I don't know.
I think for the supporters, I mean, if you're in your own circle, like if you're in a group chat or something like that, and we're joking around and we're like, or even on Twitter where you're not tweeting at those people's supporters and like telling them specifically things, but like just make sure you're putting the onus on the actual person running and the apparatus behind them, and also make a structural critique. Say, hey, Joe Biden isn't just a horrible person who's melting his brain in front of us all. He's part of a system that's fucked, and we need to we need to unfuck the system.
I do think I understand it's hard to do, and it's like incredibly hypocritical of me to say this, but I think while your candidate who you support is running, you should attempt to be relatively kind.
Yes.
I know it's very difficult. And we've all been there.
Yes.
But, you should attempt to because even in person we all do this. There's no way a friend of yours is like, oh, I like Pete Buttigieg, and you're like,
we just start
that
railing on him.
No one does that. Yeah. In person you'd be like, oh, I've seen Pete Buttigieg. Sometimes he's very eloquent, but I think Bernie Sanders is a better candidate because he has better policies regarding Medicare.
Start with a compliment. The way that
that's the easiest way to convince people is
he's an intelligent guy.
Really well. Yeah.
Or with Liz Warren, you could say hey, she's great. In fact, she's one of my top 3 picks for this field. I just think that you're not going to have the momentum with her.
And I know it's
arguments.
Incredibly difficult to do, and that's why I think most of the people who do the dunking, it's 100% for entertainment value because most of those people have everyone is, but I think most of those people have high Twitter counts or a podcast or some online media show or something. So they do it because the people already in the circle think it's really funny. But then someone outside the circle sees you do it to their candidate and they're like, oh, I get it. Those guys are dicks.
Yeah.
I don't have to listen to them. Or that girl's just a bitch. because like, you know, like I as a member of the Yang Gang, like I had a lot of people come like on Twitter and be like, yeah, he's just like a heartless grifter, and I just had to be like, well, that is a person I'm not going to listen to anymore, because like like, you know, like,
this
why
is
would
my
I
guy.
ever
Yeah,
like, right, like that's my guy. And even if you had like I think at least us on this podcast agree there were like tons of worse candidates than Yang, but like even with those candidates, if you genuinely want your candidate to win, you should attempt to be at least soften the blow of saying like what Nick said, like feed them one compliment first and then say why your guy's better. Like that's all you have to do. Because the dunking on only improves your circle that already exists.
Even
you're
better,
not expanding your group.
Ask them, let them tell you why they like the candidate first.
Why they're better.
That's a simple like question that I've had a lot of people where I have that. I ask them that in person, like, what do you like about and I give them like, say last time around, I was like, what do you like about what Hillary's saying in this election? And sometimes that stops them in their tracks to where they have to say, wait, what do I like about, like, is this just a personality thing? I've literally had someone have that moment of realization when I just asked them the question, what exactly do you like? And I was asking sincerely because I didn't know what could be that tangibly, you know, coherent inside that campaign in 2016. And most of them, it was either they admitted that it was an identity thing. I think a woman should be in the White House and I think it's her time and all this kind of stuff. And the other people were like, oh, I just really hadn't even thought about that. I just thought it was, you know, she was next up. Like, like get people to say why it is that they're supporting their person. And that gives you an open door when they say something like, oh, I like Liz Warren because I think our healthcare system's fucked. And you can say, oh, cool. Well, I mean, I love her. I'm glad she's proposing something positive. But when you look at these two policies, one of them is definitely a more strong case for covering. You know, you can open doors.
Or at least I think decide if you want to be like an entertainer or an activist.
Yeah,
those are very different classes.
Exactly.
Like the people who are actively trying to convince people to come to your side are different than the people who are just like you would mainstream entertainers might be like the mainstream media, but like, and they might try to like dunk on Bernie Sanders or someone else because they're like for their side, but they're not going to convince the Bernie Sanders people to come over to the Joe Biden side by being like a dick about Bernie Sanders. It's never going to happen. So I think you just have to decide if you like genuinely want your candidate to win or you want to continue being an entertainer, because I think they're just different groups. And there's nothing wrong with either of them. It's just, what do you want to do?
And there is some overlap. You can be someone who's dunking and make such coherent and smart arguments while you're doing it that you're maybe not bringing in those people's voters, but maybe you're bringing in adjacent voters. Like, hey,
or dude, in like we had the Mehdi Hassanj bit at one time where he just like fucking demolished Pete Buttigieg, but none of it was in like a he's a rat face fuck kind of way. It was in a way of like, oh, this is what he said 6 months ago, and
why
now
he said
this
something different.
Yeah, why would you change completely your view in 6 months? Like, it doesn't have to be like a
character flaw. When you make it a character flaw, it puts the onus on the person for liking them.
And they have to become super defensive.
Yeah.
Like that's human beings' first impulse is to say like, oh, you said this about my guy. I just said Gunner in the middle of the video.
You little Gunner.
Yeah, I love Gunner. But yeah, like if you just come straight out and attack someone, like their first impulse is to like defend themselves, like even if they're completely wrong. So just like, let's tone it down a little bit. Let's get the chill vibes.
Like let your vibes be an attracting force for good, you know? Bring people into the...
I think
we are an hour. We're about 50 minutes into this conversation, so we're going to
halftime,
significant point of that, and we're going to halftime. So who wants to go first for shout outs?
I guess I'll go first. It's just a quick one because I really didn't plan a shout out, but I did just watch John Q the other day. Fucking good movie, guys. You guys ever watch John Q?
No.
It's like an old Denzel Washington movie where like his kid needs like a heart transplant, but he's just like a mill worker and doesn't have the money to do it, and so he's kicked off his like insurance plan, and then like his kid can't get on the donor list because he doesn't have the money to afford the transplantation and all that shit. And it was made in like the early 2000s.
Wow.
But it's like an incredible, like still to this day, I watched
poignant
like
critique. Yeah. Like
poignant critique of our whole healthcare system. But yeah, he ends up like taking over like the lobby of this hospital with like a gun and is like, yeah, you're gonna give my kid like that heart transplant. And like, yeah, so it's just like, it gets wild, but
that is wild.
But it's like, but he's like essentially in the movie for taking hostages and everything. he's not like marketed as the bad guy of the movie. The bad guy of the movie is like the American healthcare system. Yeah. And that also spreads on to like a lot of other shows where like we've talked about in person many times where it's just like Breaking Bad wouldn't make sense in like another country because they'd be like, oh, so he needs to sell drugs to afford cancer treatments?
Yeah, like what?
I don't. That plot doesn't really follow, dog. I don't really get that.
Is this based in the 60s? Yeah. What are you talking? What are we talking about here? Like,
yeah. So John Q's a really good movie. It's Denzel Washington, who's just like a fantastic actor.
Yeah, of course.
And I'd recommend it to whoever, just to like kind of think in like a more entertainment-y way about how fucked it is that some people get left out of life-saving procedures because they don't have a certain amount of commas in their bank account.
Yep. Absolutely. Well,
so one of you guys
go for it.
All right. You guys hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, it's the first time I'm hearing y'all.
I had a lot of stuff I wanted to say, but I started to say
I know.
They can't hear me. I'm just gonna be quiet. All right. My shout out goes to a super asshole. Like this person, I don't know what their reason for it is, but just based off the article is you're a super douche. I'm gonna name drop him. They're Daniel Hall of New York.
Fuck you, Daniel.
Fuck you, Daniel. Daniel Hall.
If you're mentally ill, then it's not your fault.
Yeah. Hey, I don't know.
Let's not get into that. Let's not get into that bowl of worms.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that's true. Might still be your fault. I don't know.
Daniel.
More than 2 is what I'm gonna say.
At New York Presbyterian Hudson Valley Hospital, decided to slash 22 cars' different tires.
Oh my fuck!
And doctors.
That's not great, Daniel.
That's pretty fucked up. It goes in. They did find some PCP on him.
Oh man!
Okay. I didn't. No, not necessarily mental illness, just fucked up on drugs.
Yeah, it's
still. I don't know why you would ever feel inclined to slash tires of healthcare workers.
Like, why specifically there? Unless it is like it's hard to imagine this being a random act, you know?
Yeah, I just can't.
During this,
the day before, he also burned down a 5G tower.
Yeah.
That sounds like a little schizophrenic to me. Then. Like, these people are all part of the conspiracy to infect us with the Rona through the 5G towers.
Oh, dude.
But yeah, I don't know. That's just, I saw that and I was just like, that's so fucked up. I mean, these people are, every day they put their
heroes of our time.
But they are the heroes of our time. That puts it perfectly. Like, working their asses off, like, and they get their fucking tires slashed.
So, yeah. I
coming off a 40-hour shift, not a 40-hour week, a 40-hour shift, and then all of a sudden your fucking tires are slashed. And that's just
man,
thing you have to deal with. I just can't. But yeah, fuck you, Daniel Hall. I don't care if you were on PCP. That's fucked up.
John's movie was John Q. If this guy had a movie, it'd be John Q and on.
Yep.
But yeah, fuck you, Daniel.
I'm with that.
And I have mine. Now, my shout out is I'm just going to very briefly mention what he does, but this will be something that will be tagged into the end. We'll watch it with you guys. It'll be our chaser, actually. But on CNBC, the belly of the beast, the business half of NBC here, they brought on, big mistake, they brought on a billionaire who has a brain. Chamath Palihapitiya.
Probably butchered that, sorry.
Yeah, way butchered. Oh, Palihapitiya. But he basically was one of the original founders of Facebook. And he was kind of one of the people in the background telling people like, maybe we shouldn't be doing this, or maybe we shouldn't be fucking around like that. You know, he was being a billionaire. It's hard to be a good dude. He found a way to kind of be a good dude. But he goes on to CNBC and just absolutely stuns the host, just shuts him the hell down. It's so good.
Now we'll bring up, I think he runs a private equity firm, and I think that's why they
social capital,
yeah, but I think that's why they invited him on, and they were like, oh, it's just like another PE
bring a
guy.
Private equity guy,
yeah, like we know who this guy, like the vibe this guy's.
He's one of us.
Yeah.
He's on our team.
Ooh, should have done a little more research, buddy.
Yeah, because basically he's like, who cares? Who cares if billionaires are hurting? But yeah, we'll play the full clip for you at the end of the episode. It's fantastic. Can't wait to show it. And we'll move on to the segments. Did we decide we wanted to throw it to John first for his?
I think we're going to me first.
All right.
Yeah.
So we have our first version of Slightly
Zoom version.
Zoom first satellite location where we couldn't, check John's work right over his shoulder. But he had 5 minutes to prepare.
Yeah. Cheated.
He definitely cheated. He didn't even look in the bucket. He just said an idea and like
came with a topic.
Yeah, he's been researching this like the last couple of days.
No, if I just came with a topic, it would have been like UBI.
Yeah.
Cool. I'll take 40 minutes, guys. I got this. Don't worry.
Oh man. So we're gonna send it to John. Oh, so go ahead, McLean.
We've explained it before. John made a big fucking bucket full of different topics. John pulls 2, picks one. If he doesn't like either, which he didn't, he pulled a third.
That happened this time. I don't even remember who I pulled. It was 2 like random names. It was probably like one of the most 100 influential women in history and like some random artist or something. Because it was like 2 names I had written down for some reason and knew neither of the people. So I was like, okay, third and final. And I got data rights.
Data rights. Important topic.
5 minutes. He had 5 minutes to research. Now I'm about to start the clock. And John has to be the expert on data rights for the next 10 minutes.
Righty. I'm going to start my clock too, just so I can tell how close I'm getting.
Yeah, I can't really tell you. All right.
Yeah, right.
Ready, John?
All right, I'm ready. Okay, so data rights. Okay, so data rights are important because it's not necessarily only like owning the rights to your data, but it's like deciding how you want to distribute your data or like what companies you want to allow access to your data or like what programs you want to participate in. So I think like an important scenario to lay out with this is like, let's say you're a member of like a loyalty program at like an Albertsons and like Albertsons loyalty program collects your shopping data. And they see that like, oh, this guy tends to buy 2 packs of cigarettes every couple of days. And he also tends to buy like a 12-pack of booze every couple of days too, or a 12-pack of beer. And then if you're in any other state besides these dumb states with like the hard liquor laws, you might buy like a couple bottles of vodka or whiskey or something. But they collect this and they're like, oh shit, he eats mostly processed food and not a lot of fresh veggies. And they process all this and they bundle it and they sell it to like your insurance company.
Exactly.
And all of a sudden, like
your premiums are up.
Rates go way up because it's like, oh, well, John, when we look at your lifestyle and compare it to people with similar lifestyles, you tend to have like way higher health costs later in life. So your premiums are actually going to go higher. And it's like, you decided to participate in the loyalty program with a company not affiliated at all with your insurance company, but then they sold it to someone who probably sold that to your insurance company. Because there's these massive companies that all they do is process people's data, bundle them together. And a word I was reading about was bucketize, because a lot of times your data as like an individual human being isn't that valuable. But when they can put you in a bucket, or but essentially metadata, but put you in a bucket with people who live like similar lifestyles,
geographic or age or gender.
Exactly. Race, like whatever you want to do, when they can put you in that bucket of like, oh, 26-year-old, like overweight, unhealthy diet. These are like the things we can extrapolate about his life going forward, So that's a thing with data rights is like, you might not want to be put in that bucket because a lot of times whether it's like an inefficiently programmed algorithm or like inefficient human data, like you might not have all the similar attributes as someone in your same bucket. And currently right now, you don't have a lot of freedom to not be put in that bucket. Like a lot of people already know Facebook collects data on you, whether you are a member of Facebook or not, because it still allows them to sell things to you and make money off of you. So there's things called like dark profiles, which is like, if you searched me, I wouldn't have a profile public where you could like see my picture and stuff, but like
using your IP address.
Facebook still has an account for me because they still want to collect everything else on the web they find out about me and figure out what they want to market to me on like Instagram or like whatever else I use or anything like that. Data rights was like, it was a little bit difficult because it's such a broad topic, because it could also bring in things like, I know the EU has something called like the right to be forgotten, which is essentially like after a certain amount of time, you can have things deleted from the internet in a way like we can't in America. You know, when you have like have you guys heard of like the Streisand effect?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like
I remember
people
that.
try to get things deleted and they
Mhm.
can't, and it just makes them like way more famous. Like when the Berkeley security guard like pepper sprayed all the kids, and then Berkeley tried to pay a firm like $200,000 to get it wiped off the internet, and like most people saw the second post, not the first post, because like they tried to get it deleted, so it like made it way more famous.
Yep.
But the right to be forgotten essentially brings up like if you made a mistake when you were like 18 or even like 15 or like 20, like should you be viewed as that person in like your 50s or 60s or anything?
Yeah.
Like there's going to be a vibe, especially going forward for our generation. Like we might look back on this podcast when we're 60 years old and be like, holy fuck, did I have bad opinions? And I wish that wasn't on the internet forever, and I wish I could delete it, you know? And I think whether it's like this, or whether it's like things you've Googled before, or things you posted on Twitter 5 years ago, or things you posted on Facebook 10 years ago, like there's probably some things you wish were gone forever, but they're essentially still findable.
Well,
so
have you know who Tom Scott is?
Sounds really familiar.
I'm sure you've seen his videos because they're always all over Reddit. But like he's a data engineer and a computer science, PhD, all kinds of stuff. He's one of the leading like online content creators about data stuff. But he did a thing where he thinks that the next stage, if we don't bring some kind of stop to the data rights or to the data right, bring some muscle to the data rights, I guess, sector
side of the argument.
Yeah, exactly. Then you're going to get what's called a social what did he call it, your social credit score.
That's what China's doing currently.
And it has and basically it's going to be a global infusement between capital, credit, home ownership, insurance rates, and then basically they said like
how respectful you are to authority.
Exactly, and exactly. And they say some people are like are going to have they won't have the apps and the stuff and the data to like build their social credit score, so they'll have a social credit score of 0 because they're just not using it. Those people won't have access to certain services. Like that's very real future.
In China, where like China already has like social credit programs where like if you say something negative about the regime, you might not be able to take like a domestic flight because it's like, oh, like we don't trust this guy to be on planes is like how they would frame it, but it's really like, oh, say mean things about us and like you're gonna lose some of your rights, like. But whether if it's not like physical rights, it could be economic rights, like you're saying, of like, oh, we looked at our data sets and we actually don't trust you to buy a car. So
we're not going to give you. We're not going to approve you for a loan.
Transportation. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We're not going to approve you for a loan. Yeah, and it also.
Oh, and you want the discount bus pass? Sorry, nope.
Yeah, exactly. We don't trust you to do that either. But like bringing it in, like something like that kind of program combined with facial recognition, and like the right to never be deleted means like you can never live down anything you've done in the past. And if you want to make changes, but the people in power disagree with them, that's now going to affect your social credit score because like. The way facial recognition is like progressing, if you're at a protest or like even if you're making posts online, but they're tied to your physical image, then they can always like tie it to where you are in real life and like tag you as more suspicious. They even have programs now that are like linked in with police cameras that they're trying to sell police departments across the country, which are like it'll have pull up a picture of like Nick and it'll be like, oh, Nick was arrested for protesting civil rights abuses in like the Washington D.C. 10 years ago. We should look at him just in case because he does have a criminal record.
And a possible radical political history, possible this,
And with no data rights, they can do things like that. Whereas if we had like a cogent, like some bill of rights for data, then Nick could decide if he wants them allowed to use that data. I think another point that I wanted to bring up was like the way you want to be addressed by data. Because another thing it brought into my light when I was doing my couple minutes of research was like they're using algorithms for like sentencing guidelines now for crimes, which is like, oh, like a person of Nick's age and his like criminal history and like his educational background and like maybe his family history or whatever, like his recidivism chance is like 85%. So we might want to like sentence him higher.
Or deny parole or
deny parole. So I think there also has to be a way you can say like, I would not like to participate in those programs that are based around like guessing who I am as a human being based off of some larger data set. Like whether or not it's accurate, like it kind of takes away some of your free will as a human being and like free agency to be like, oh, Nick, we know who you are because we've analyzed 1 million people who are similar to you. So we got the vibe, dude. Don't even worry about it.
Yeah, they'll create classifications, and they'll find a way to create enough different unique classifications to bucketize us and pick us out of a pool and just say, hey, you're a 20 to 25-year-old male with this income level, this that, and they can predict probably with a fairly decent amount of accuracy.
But that's the scary thing is
future,
they're right. They're most data shows you can predict relatively okay about some things. You can't predict a lot of things. They've tried to predict children's health benefits based off of where they start, and you can get some right, but you're never going to get higher than 60% or so. But companies are trying to sell you the idea that oh, we can do this.
Data is
so
God.
Let us do this. Yeah, exactly. And the fact that people are trying to sell this and with no set of data rights established in law means you're only going to have further and further companies who step in and say oh, we can actually lower the accident claim rate in your insurance company if you give us access to all of your customers' data information and stuff like that. And without a bill, a data essentially right set, there's nothing you can do about it. The last thing I wanted to touch on, because I only have 30 seconds left, is that a thing that Andrew Yang brought up during his presidency, which is people are making bank off of you and your data set that you give to them for free. So you should see some cut of that money if you want. If you want to sell your data back to them for some price, then that's fine. Or if you don't and it's all your information, that's fine too. But there's no reason that multiple billion-dollar industries should exist off of free data they gather from the populace.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it should be a personal set of rights guaranteed, like you're saying, just data rights for the person. Yeah. You hold the autonomous key to it,
Yeah. Well, the other thing you have to think is even with Fourth Amendment rights and stuff, with the ways courts address those, a lot of times they address them based around papers or persons, and it's is a laptop my paper or person? Not technically, but also that was written down in the 1700s. So could they have foreseen me carrying all of my personal information in my pocket, not on a piece of paper? Who knows? And if the courts and justices aren't going to address that, then we have to have a legislative set of rights.
Yeah.
Define what can be done with our data,
or at least a data court or something like that. Just some apparatus,
Well, and you got to factor into all these people making these decisions are 60 plus. They don't know what data it's collecting on you. Half the time they don't understand the internet
what do you
or how the printer in their office works.
Exactly.
They're not going to understand that there's companies who make billions of dollars a year
just
and all
selling
they do is
their information
data from grocery stores. Yeah, that would be wild. So you need intelligent people to step in and make decisions about what data is going to look like in the future.
And for anyone who liked the last 10 minutes, I do have one thing to shout out on the topic of a YouTuber, real great video essayist named Philosophy Tube, Ollie Thorne. He had a really, really, really great Socratic breakdown of data and the idea of data rights and data in our society, where he kind of goes back and forth between kind of the conversation of telling someone that their data is being, basically trying to our version of this as if we were explaining it to someone brand new to it completely, that had never.
Well, and there are two sides too, because most of the time they're collecting data, it's because you get something free, you get to use Facebook,
but they don't make it plain English. Exactly.
Yeah, you're the product, you're being sold, or when the grocery store gives you a discount for having a rewards program, it's so that they can make more money off of you. You're never there's some analogy back in the day where it was if you're getting something free, you're not buying a product, you are the product. No one gives away free things just for fun. If they're giving you a free service, it's because they can make more money off the back end than they can.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Well, thank you, John. What a great segment.
Killed it.
No problem. And I think we're tossing it kind of to you two as a team just to update us about.
We'll start with Maklain.
Cool.
We're going coronavirus.
All right. You guys hear me?
I got you.
I can. As long as we don't talk. So Nick, shut up for the next minute or two.
All right. So Nick and I are going to we have separate stories, but they're both pretty similar in the vast coronavirus, right? So I wanted to point out that as of today, every U.S. state is now under a major disaster declaration. So this is due to coronavirus. And this has never happened in U.S. history. So all 50 states, plus Guam, D.C., Puerto Rico, where everything has a disaster declaration. And I guess this is pretty big because this kind of points out how serious this is. Wyoming was the last state to do it. They have the lowest numbers in the U.S. They're I believe they're bouncing back and forth with maybe North Dakota between who has more cases. But it took 22 days from New York being the first state to do it and Wyoming being the last of the 50 to do it. Wow. So it kind of points out how serious this is. I have one more coronavirus story just to point out. Let's see here. Sorry. There is a U.S. company that has a factory in Mexico. Sorry, my phone's being weird. So this company makes medical stuff, right? So it's the Anglo-American healthcare firm Smith Medical. And Friday, the Mexican government shut down the plant. So John will probably jump in here and talk a little bit on China on this topic, but this factory is located in Tijuana, which borders Baja California, and it was shut down because they were making ventilators. They refused to sell the ventilators to the Mexican government. They were making them in Mexico and shipping them up to the U.S., thinking, this is a U.S.-based company with a factory in Mexico. This factory has Mexican citizens working in it and all this stuff, and they're making stuff and sending it up to the U.S. So Mexican government said, no, you're shut down. Factory's done. If you're gonna make ventilators and ship them up to the U.S. just because the U.S. owns the factory, no go. So they shut them down.
Yeah. I don't know if Mexico just shut them down, but what happened in China was China essentially repossessed the factories and we're just like, oh, like you're a U.S. company, like good one, like your factory's here. So you're actually now making like ventilators and face masks and PPE for our country because that's where you're located. And it's going to be some weird, big, protracted legal battle. But essentially, China's like an authoritarian.
Yeah,
like,
they won.
Regime. Yeah,
they decided to win and they won.
Yeah, exactly. Like they're in a crisis, and the factories were located there. So they just said, "Oh, you're not a U.S. company anymore. You're ours." And I think just another quick one to add before we toss it to Nick was 3M is like a U.S. based company who like is just massive and they're involved in everything. But they had some like factories that were making N95 masks in Taiwan, and they were trying to ship those all around the world. And now the U.S. and Canada are in kind of a spat because we repossessed some of those masks while they were like on their way to Canada that Canada actually bought. We just kind of like swooped them because I think they flew through a U.S. airport. But this was the other thing that I learned on Reddit that like was something I had no idea about, because we did this to multiple countries too. Just side note for anyone who doesn't realize how fucked up the U.S. is, was like say they were flying N95 masks out of Taiwan and like France already bought them for, let's say, like $1 million. We had people roll up and be like, hey, we'll buy those for $3 million cash. And companies did that. Like, it's a little bit on the company, but it's way more fucked up that to our allies, we were like outbidding them on the tarmac as like the masks were about to go to their countries. So that was something we did. The other thing that I just wanted to address was that like supposedly almost all of like the pulp, like the paper product that goes into making N95 masks is harvested in Canada. Like Canada is the source for all this like specific type of timber that can be turned into N95 masks. So like it might not be the best strategy to fight with Canada about this if they have a monopoly on the whole world's like supply. It is down the supply chain. Like they're not making the masks, but at the end of the day, the wood comes from their country. So if they wanted to say like, hey, US gets no more N95 masks, or we're not giving you the lumber, like they could do that. They're just like a bigger man than we are, and they're not yet, but like Trudeau was talking about how pissed he was that we like outbid and stole their masks. So if we're gonna get in a fight with someone, like let's not do it with A, our allies, but B, the people who like actually control the supply of like the base product that goes into making these things.
Yeah, probably not a good rock to throw in a glass house.
Yeah.
And that's just goes to say that, I mean, there's tons and tons of stupid decisions the U.S. is making, and that just falls into the pot of one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Also, like the fact that we're bidding against each other for stuff and just raising the prices, as opposed to the U.S. stepping in and just being like, yeah, they cost 40 grand. We're going to buy 100,000 of them and then
At that price.
them.
Yep.
Yeah. They're instead having each state bid against each other state to decide what the price is, and then obviously just turns into a bidding war. So yeah, there's been a lot of dumb things.
That's a perfect pivot into what I was going to talk about, because like the system that we have right now in place is so uniquely inept at handling something like this. Like we're literally decades too late for this is the problem. Now, and that sounds like a hyper exaggeration when I say it like first, but
well, also in a less incompetent regime, we could be somewhat okay.
Yeah. Like you would still be like, we'd probably still be number one in the world for cases.
But the Obama administration wouldn't have had New York bid against California.
Exactly, and they wouldn't have had a pandemic response team cut out of the budget.
Dissolved.
Yeah. Like there's tons of things that are uniquely bad. As much as the liberals are going to cheer and shout when we say this, that is uniquely bad about Trump. And do not be confused. He is uniquely bad at this
on a national level. And there's also de Blasio and Cuomo were telling people like, oh, go celebrate like the Vietnamese Moon Festival in like the beginning of March. So we're not just shitting on Trump, but like there's a lot of things the federal government can do that states can't. And if we had like an actual executive branch that was like functioning and competent, they would have went a little smoother. But
yeah, and
not shit on liberals, because
yes.
Get in, like,
exactly.
Just be like, hey, fair and balanced.
Yep.
Got idiots everywhere.
Exactly. It's on all sides, and it's also structural. I mean, not structural in that like we couldn't have had an America at some point, or we couldn't have had a version of our timeline where we ended up with a society that was ready for this, but we don't have the ready in place mechanisms that other countries do. Sure, no countries really have like an in place UBI system, but there is a significant amount that have much more power in the federal government than their states and provinces, and allow a swift movement from being an economy focus to a death like reduction focus, harm reduction. Like that shift would be instant and easy, and it happens fast. Denmark did it, Sweden did it, and Norway did it. They shut shit down, and it happened, and it worked. But they also had a ton of other things. Like they don't have a homelessness problem in Sweden or in Denmark. They don't have a bunch of people sleeping on top of each other in piles or in tents all over their city spreading things. Or they don't have people who, basically were denied the medical, access to the hospital that was going to test them.
Also, like constitutional democracy versus parliamentary democracy, where constitutional democracies tend to respond slow. A lot of times we're correct, but we're very slow. Versus parliamentary democracies almost always have a built-in majority. So that means they can respond like super quickly to things.
Yes.
Versus us with the constitutional democracy means you have to get it passed through the Democrat-controlled House, and then that has to get through the Republican-controlled Senate, and then the executive branch can do something.
And even then, there's still things you can't do because we're in a federalist system where local and state power hold a lot of issues. Tell
state to do, but versus like a parliamentary system where Trudeau already has his built-in majority, and he can just turn to them and pass a law, at least ideally. Versus we're essentially going to respond way slower, which is why most people didn't have or really no one had a baked-in UBI, but Canada now does and has already started dispersing payments, and it's going to go for 4 months. Versus our first one-time payment looks like it's going to be at least a couple weeks out.
So it was funny. They always use these corporate jargon terms like how nimble a corporation is, or how agile this nice little like ball of people that can just move people around and make it work and survive the tough elements of the economy. Why don't we talk about this when we're talking about our government? Why isn't our government nimble? Why isn't our government able to respond? Absolutely. Literally, like like I said, and like we said before, there are bad actors, not even bad actors, but actors making horrible, horrible decisions at all levels, and some trying their best to make good ones and trying to inform people. But because of the way that we're structured and how decentralized like the vast majority of the things that needed to happen were, Most of it was at the state level. We live in Idaho. We're not good at responding to things at the state level. We're bad at it. Utah's worse at it. And like you just don't see this kind of coalescence of community harm reduction. And you can do that in most societies more nimbly, much more better than us.
Nick, did you hear the Bundys are here in Idaho right now?
Wait, what? Yo.
The Bundys are here. And
are they scared of the virus?
No, they're the opposite of scared of the virus. They're trying to get a church to host a 1,000-person rally tomorrow on Easter Sunday in Idaho. And the Bundys are going to protect the rally. I don't know if it actually went through. This was an article I read a week ago. But they're trying to rally 1,000 people together in a show of strength against the virus, and how the government won't be able to step in and tell them to not peaceably assemble because it's their constitutional right. Which I like a little bit like props to them for standing up, because none of the other conspiracy theorists are saying like this is a far overreach of my constitutional right to assemble. But also like a virus doesn't care. Yeah. Like it's not like after terrorist attack, we should go out and party and support businesses and stuff, because it's like, terrorists, you can't keep me down. But the coronavirus does not care if you're like feeling very strong and hopeful about the future of America. Like it's not gonna like, I'll pass over that group because they're not scared of me, you know. But yeah, I just wanted to bring that up just a side note because I just remembered it. But
it's so good.
Alan or Cliven or one of the Bundys is here, and they're trying to, I don't know if they'll get it, but tomorrow's Easter, and they were trying to get a giant rally going for Easter to like peaceably assemble with a bunch of people with AR-15s just in case the police tried to shut them down.
Oh my God, that is insane.
Yeah,
dude, that's like some straight up like drinking the Kool-Aid shit right there.
It's pretty cool. I wish I knew sooner, because I would have went just to see like what it was like. Yeah, you know, because like that would have been a weird vibe for a room, just to be like, oh, we're like standing up to the powers that be by like catching a virus. Yeah. But yeah, I found out way too late. But yeah, they've been trying to do this for a couple weeks, so I guess tomorrow like it'll be told.
We'll find out.
Succeeded. Yeah.
Is it just like all the way on the Oregon border or something?
No, I think they met in Boise.
Oh no!
Like a week and a half ago. Now they might go up further north, because that tends to be where like the farther right crazies are. But when they had the meeting about whether or not to do it, when they had the meeting, it was in Boise. So I read about it in the New York Times. That was like the first time Idaho made national news, was us coming out and saying, virus can't stop me, can't keep me down.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
The Bundys.
Yeah, just wanted to bring the Bundys into it.
But yeah, I think that's the end of my part of the segment, at least. So
cool.
I think we're good.
We're ready for a chaser. Which I just real quick on the chaser, I've watched this video probably like 6 times.
Oh,
every time I come across it, I have to watch it. Like I can't not watch this video. It's been in like 6 unique locations, but on like each app, I got to be like, okay, it's worth enough point.
Yeah. And then one time I even like, after I'd seen it multiple times, I watched a clip and they cut most of it, and it was only like 40 seconds of it on like Rising or whatever. And then I had to go in and Google it and rewatch the whole thing again. Yeah. Because of how good this is. That wasn't enough.
Yeah. That didn't hit me.
Oh. Yeah. Oh. So we're going to inject this straight into your brain, just like ours. So let me get our screen share ready. So you can see the look of shock on the host's face.
Just clutching at his pearls.
All right, I found it here. Sorry, I'm gonna close that out and share screen. No, okay.
Nick's got to close all his porn before.
Yes. Yeah, there we go. Can you guys hear? Did you guys hear him say
Yeah.
I did.
Okay, cool. We go full screen here
and start it over.
And let's start it about here. That's where it really gets good.
Is needed everywhere, perhaps. But are you suggesting? You keep saying propping up zombie companies. Are you arguing to let airlines, for example, fail?
Yes.
Why? I mean, how does that make sense in the broader scheme of the?
Okay, like what we were talking about in the first half, where like when people ask you really dumb questions, just a simple like yes Like that's the right answer. That's
Right
why
there.
this guy's so fire.
Yes.
It's because he doesn't try to go softly explain it.
Mhm.
He asks a really dumb question. He's like, yes. And then when the guy keeps going, then he comes in with his explanation. But I just
So
have to point
good.
that out. Like, if someone confronts you with a dumbass question, feel free just to be like, yes, that is what I'm saying.
This is how you handle that.
Yeah. This is how you handle that kind of interview.
This
like,
is exactly.
Yeah.
All right, we'll go right to here.
The economy.
Because it's not, because when you look at what it means, this is why I'm saying, like, this is a lie that's been purported by Wall Street. When a company fails, it does not fire their employees. It goes through a packaged bankruptcy, right? If anything, what happens is the people who have the pensions inside those companies, the employees of these companies, end up owning more of the company.
One more stop. As he goes on to explain, the host is going to pretend he didn't hear anything in the last 10 seconds that he said.
True.
He's going to ask him. He's going to ask him. And but what about the people losing? What don't you think employees?
You said the word deserves.
Yeah.
Here
it comes,
about
babe.
like 90% of what I said.
Oh God. Let's keep it going.
The people that get wiped out are the speculators that own the unsecured tranches of debt or the folks that own the equity. And by the way, those are the rules of the game. That's right, because these are the people that purport to be the most sophisticated investors in the world. They deserve to get wiped out. But the employees don't get wiped out. The pensions don't typically get wiped out.
Why does anybody, I just don't understand, why does anybody deserve, using your word, to get wiped out from a crisis created like this? How does anybody deserve to get wiped out?
Well, but just be clear, like, who are we talking about? We're talking about a hedge fund that serves a bunch of billionaire family offices? Who cares? Let them get wiped out. Who cares? They don't get the summer in the Hamptons? Who cares?
I mean, there are people. You don't think the employees?
Hold on, Scott.
You don't think the employees of these companies own stocks? I mean, own their stocks, own the company's stocks?
You can look on Bloomberg and you can see what percentage of these companies are typically owned by. These things are owned by BlackRock. These things are owned by these huge, amorphous organizations. Ultimately, downstream, and the employee owns a few $100s or a few $1,000 of shares.
Well, I just don't understand.
So
this is like a natural disaster. And why does anybody deserve to get wiped out? Wouldn't that be immoral in and of itself?
No.
No, because what's happening right now is what I'll tell you is on Main Street today, people are getting wiped out. And right now, rich CEOs are not. Boards that had horrible governance are not. Hedge funds are not. People are. 6 million people just this week alone basically saying, holy mackerel, I don't know how I'm going to make my own expenses for the next few weeks, days, months. So it's happening today to individual Americans. And what we've done is disproportionately prop up and protect poor performing CEOs, companies, and boards. And you have to wash these people out.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh
yes.
Man, that is the most pure.
I don't get the host. Obviously, the host is paid to be dumb.
Yeah.
Because he can't come out and say like that was a very good point.
Yeah.
But it doesn't make any sense. Like if United goes under, like all the terminals, all the planes, like they don't just like
evaporate. Yeah.
They're not snapped out of existence. Like it doesn't fucking happen that way. He's right. The people on Main Street do. If you're like a mom and pop clothing store, you might go like disappear after losing your 3 employees.
But BlackRock doesn't own them. Let's go. Yeah.
So fuck BlackRock. Get them out of there.
Get them out of there. Speculation and private equity are supposed to be the solution to the problems and the inefficiencies of capitalism, but they're clearly not the answer. Yeah. Like it's happening in this way. And just every time that host asked him an indignant, like absurd pearl clutching question, he answered it perfectly. It was perfect. One word and then explain. One word and then explain. Don't teeter totter on it. Don't be like, well, sometimes people are good, good actors in this field and we have to be able to decipher. No, it's not. The answer is no.
Also put simply too, like the whole deal with the stock market is you take risks investing in companies. And if they succeed,
you have to be held accountable for that risk.
And if they don't succeed, that's when you lose money. But if you're not held accountable for the risk, what's the fucking point? You gain money either way, then what's the fucking point? Like that's why this is all wild. That's the one thing a lot of libertarians and like far left people agree on is a lot of like true libertarians are saying let Boeing fail. let United fail. Like if they can't fucking like succeed in this, then that's their own goddamn problem.
Yep.
And even Mark Cuban the other day, like usually Mark Cuban's full of shit. Mark Cuban the other day went on to some program and was like, yeah, if I was negotiating for the U.S. government, I would say, yeah, you want to bail out? I'm going to take some part of your stock market share. And he was like, the host was like, what if they said that they don't want to do that? Or what if they leave? He was like, well, let them fucking walk out of the room.
Yeah.
If they think they can get a better deal from private equity, they can do that. But if they need the government's money, we're taking a chunk.
Absolutely.
I was like, people are actually on TV with like the right answers.
It's amazing, dude.
Yeah.
It's just the most like rare moment right there that we just saw. Like, and
like what we said earlier, they accidentally invited him on because he's private equity.
Yeah. It's like, how could this go wrong?
Yeah.
But yeah.
All right, we wrapping up.
Yeah. I guess my last little note with that is it's okay for you to live paycheck to paycheck and not feel too bad about it, because the government lives recession to recession, and the companies live bailout to bailout. So,
Nick, it's irresponsible if you don't have a 6-month safety fund. But I think most Fortune 500 companies should live week to week. I think that's smart.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Because if they didn't do that, then what's going to happen to my dividends? If they had to save money, they couldn't give me that money. And then what's the fucking point? Vote them out of the share of the board because they're not dividing that money to me. They're trying to save it for rainy day. That's wild.
Yep. Absolutely, man. And
we could go off on that for
hours,
but a different day.
Yeah, but we'll have to bring it to you another time. There's going to be a lot of trimming to do on this episode, but shout out to everyone checking us out. Thank you for hanging with us. Hopefully we have Maklain's mic problems fixed next time so we don't trample all over him again.
Hopefully. Wasn't fun.
It's pretty funny. Hey, John, let's talk for a second so we can't get anything.
Yeah. Right,
make sure you follow us on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. Make sure you subscribe, like.
John Arterburn on Twitter.
At Nick Max with 2 C's, because I'm thick with 2 C's. But no. Just follow us there. And also, we've got 2 new spots to listen. So if you are an iHeartRadio user, go ahead and check us out on iHeartRadio. That's right. We are officially in.
I always thought iHeartRadio sounded like pretty official, so I'm glad.
Yeah, we're an iHeartRadio official podcast.
I thought that was like real shows.
Yeah,
so that's cool.
Well, a lot of the times they do they hire people to make a show. It's like a Netflix original.
Just pretend we're one of those people.
Yeah, we're an iHeartRadio.
We're an official iHeartRadio podcast.
And we're also on Stitcher. So if you use Stitcher or iHeartRadio, you are now
allowed to listen to us.
We've come to you. So, but yeah. These videos are going to keep going up on YouTube. Check us out next week. And if you want to let us know, make sure you tweet at Maklain Autry. Tell him you can't hear him in this week's episode.
Yes. I don't know if you can even hear me now, but follow me. Thanks for listening, guys.
Peace out.
Oh my God, no. No!
Yeah.
No! Did you hear the best part, though? He said he's not the only penis man.
Florida man arrested for pulling gun on escort. She was touching everything in my house but my dick.